Hi everyone, McBeard here. I want to talk to you about Nerfs and about the public beta specifically, and about the things that I'm fairly sure that the dev team at CD Projekt Red has their eye on, and some things that the community has their eye on. And I have a feeling that these are two different groups of things. So the things that CD Projekt Red might have their eye on are things that limit design space in the future, mess with the new player experience, or affect the game in such a negative way, up to, but also including maybe not game-breaking gameplay, but incredibly strong gameplay that players can execute at certain points of the game that offer little to no counterplay. So I'm being very vague right now because I have a list prepared for you. There has been a history of nerfs in Gwent, and like kind of a history of things that have been looked at as not good for the game if they stay in. Some of these have been fairly game breaking, and I use this very lightly because I don't think any of them were actually game breaking. Just that there are certain strategies where if you don't play around them in a specific way, you'll lose all the time. So those strategies, I think, have been curbed for the most part, caught by the dev team and stymied in some way, having some mechanic removed. So I think a good example of these were, maybe let's start off with last turn plays. So there is a time in which Isengrim, Madman Lugos, and Gravehag were almost uncounterable if they were played at the end of the game. Gravehag, I think, is the one that stays the most honest to their original design. Even though they added a timer to it to allow you some counterplay, there is a situation where Isengrim keeps track of every special card you played throughout the game, and when you play Isengrim, he spawns a 3 strength unit for each one of these things. So this can lead to turns in which you would be losing, but you would have Isengrim in hand as your last card, and that would afford you 30 plus points and the win. Now, this is a very different world where there are a lot more special cards being played, but generally the spirit of that card was that it was never played outside of the very, very end of the game, and when it was played, it could decide the game. And that was very bad for the game, and players and CD Projekt Red agreed that that probably had to go. And if you find anybody out there who says they missed that part of the game, I question their thinking process. Yes, that's a sentence that I'm choosing to say. Another one would be maybe less so of a game-breaking bug, but still something that they wanted to stop for the future, and that was the infinite Henselt promote with Margarita, where with the right setup, Henselt could create a number of gold units, which would spawn another Aretuza Adepts, another row of Aretuza Adepts, which was Margarita's old ability. Whenever a gold card entered the field, she would spawn a 2-strength unit on the siege row. They'd all be on the same row, so if you were to promote the row in some way by Henselt, or use any sort of promote, another grouping of adepts would come out. So the idea was that you had a incredibly large Aretuza adept row, which you could promote and promote again to ridiculous proportions. Now, this was probably less game-breaking because it required a very specific setup to do it, but they just didn't want it to actually be part of the game, so it was removed from the game. Margarita was changed, and ultimately Henselt was changed, and ultimately, promotion effects in general were changed. So that would be my next topic, faction passives. While we can all agree that the game felt pretty good in closed beta, with some exceptions, I still think that we were pretty happy with the fact that all factions were represented up to about 45-ish K MMR, and that's really good for a game to have that kind of balance. But faction passives were still limiting design space and also creating situations where you could make cards for a faction that they either wouldn't use or that would be too strong with their passive, or, you know, and you don't want to go in the middle here. When you're making cards, you don't want to make a bunch of cards that no one's going to use. It's just a waste of resources. So they went ahead and they removed the passives, which opened up a huge new territory for every faction to get new cards, which is ultimately a great thing. But at the time, you couldn't say that any of those passives were breaking the game. You know, Monsters, Squaretel, they all had counters, but it really felt stale. And I feel like in the future, if those faction passives they stayed the same way, they would end up being, you know, the game itself would have a staleness to it that would ultimately limit a lot of choices that could be made and limit some of the choices you can make in deck building because you're always playing around the same thing, sort of. If monsters always had that carryover strength they used to have, you'd always have to have a tech against that specific thing. And your deck, maybe you wanted to play Nilfgaard, you'd always be stuck finding the same text, and it wouldn't be good enough. There would only be certain ways to deal with certain things, and that's kind of how the game would be perpetuated. By removing the passives and removing a lot of those very, very powerful techniques that, Scoia'tael always going last, Monster always carrying over large strengths into the next round in good situations, that kind of stuff needed to be dialed back a little bit just for a little bit more interesting gameplay. And I agree with almost every change they made. The last example I want to give is weather. There's a lot of talk about weather, and I think we need to play a little bit longer before we can come to a conclusion on weather. I think personally, it's hard to justify a full clear of a card that does no damage at all. So if we're talking about Skellige Storm or Ragnarok doing no damage until the opponent has already acted, that's bad for the fact that I'm putting in gold and silver cards that are 0 to me, and that's a huge risk, and I wouldn't run those cards. So now we have unplayed cards completely because of that one little change of weather triggering at the end of the opponent's turn as opposed to the beginning. So maybe that's not quite the solution. Maybe different weathers have to interact in different ways with the opponent, and I don't envy the choices that the designers have to make this really cool concept, something that's been around since Gwent Wild Hunt, making this really cool concept work, having a persistent kind of enchantment effect on a row that affects all the things on the row. I like that. I want cards like that in the game. I don't want them to feel like they're incredibly, incredibly oppressively strong or worthlessly weak. Right now, I actually think that the balance might be okay, but there are certain situations where you can play cards like Skellige Storm and Ragnarok where your opponent is put on the back foot and their answer causes them to slip further behind. Is that okay when I'm playing a silver card or a gold card to essentially cause my opponent to take damage and lose a turn? I also think there might be a problem there. There's a very, very razor thin line here on how this can interact. While you can feel good about countering the weather, but you can feel good as the one playing the weather, where is that hidden gem? Where is that hidden gem? So those are all examples of stuff that people probably have their eye on. CD Projekt Red might have their eye on, but there's one tactic out there that I encountered yesterday, and I'm going to show you the whole game. I encountered this for the first time, so my reaction is very genuine. And this is Henselt Reaver Hunter. I was playing a really cool consume list at the time that was given to me by Sisaman. So let's look at that list right now while I just continue to talk about what happens here with Henselt. Okay, so this is Sisaman's consume list that he had at the time ready to play with when I was, on Tuesdays we like to do what we call Gwent Labs, where we play with underplayed cards and maybe some decks that you want to see me play. So this was Sisaman's contribution. I played this deck for a bunch of games, and it was actually my favorite deck of the night. I really enjoyed some of the things that were happening in this deck that I haven't seen either played against me or at all. The general idea was using stuff like Harpy Eggs and maybe Neckers or some other combination of cards to get the most value out of Becker's Twisted Mirror. Harpy Eggs tend to be the ones that end up benefiting from Becker's Twisted Mirror, which is a silver card now, and I think is legit. I think that this card is as legit as Scorch could be, and you can get a lot of value from it as you can with Scorch, although the swapping of the strength can sometimes be incredibly strong and very hard to come back from. So I really enjoy Becker's Twisted Mirror. I always like the Skellige Storm Aeromancy mix right now, and it's the only other weather it's only weather here. So Aeromancy, either pulling Skellige Storm out of your deck or out of your graveyard for a second storm. I'm fine with either outcome generally. I like this combo a lot. I hope this combo doesn't change, really. It also runs Ragnarok. Now, I don't know if I would run Ragnarok generally, but there's no denying that this spell has a lot of power to it. If your opponent can clear it, they're put on the back foot, and if they can't clear it, then they have to find a way to deal with it, and that's very tough sometimes. So it's a pretty strong card, I would say, and it's in this deck, of course. It had Frightener in the deck as well, which is probably more so K-Ran food than anything, but it is a spy for monsters, so it's kind of weird getting used to the fact that monsters have that card draw spy. Fiend for locks, there's always something to lock generally, and I like that all the faction-specific lock cards have their own thing. In the Fiend's case, he cuts someone in half here, rounded down, so it's actually pretty good. It's a pretty good lock card, better than just having Cleaver by far. You're only sacrificing 1 point of strength for a lot of extra value. And then, of course, the Harpies are making the eggs. The eggs can be Beckered. The eggs can be eaten by Vran. The large Vrans can be eaten by the Ekamara for carryover. You got to be careful of cards like Mardroem and Peter Sargwenlev in the Nilfgaard matchup. They do delete Ekamaras completely, so they're not in a great spot. You have your Neckers, which are used more utility cards. You're not building around this, but these cards can still provide carryover strength for you, as can the Harpies, as can the Ekamara. So you can still enter rounds with, 10 plus points of strength. And if you end up keeping a Necker in your hand and it grows and grows and grows, you don't necessarily have to play it. You can feed it to the Kran for that extra, whatever strength it is, +8 bomb that Kran can be. I think Kran slowly coming into flavor, be understood as monsters Tibor or perhaps Hjalmar, the conditional card that can give you a lot of strength at a risk. The risk being card advantage. But if you get a Frightener in there, this is a 28 strength gold card. You're not playing the Frightener anyway in round 3. I think it works. You have your Griffins in here, your Archgriffins here to clear weather, as it is everywhere. And generally, a Blood-Curdling Roar will break an egg for you, turn it into a 12, you'll get the Harpy out of it. Also deals with cow carcasses, maybe some spies you don't want to leave on the board for Vikovara Novice to proc. Little things like that. If anything, I could say you might use more Roars. I do like this card a lot. There's only one clear here. You might be able to get away with 2 Ekamara, but it's not really about the deck. But this is the deck that I was playing and I was having a great time with. And then I ran into Henselt, and this happened. Hope you enjoy this gameplay, and I hope you enjoy... I want you to think critically, though, about if you're okay with what Henselt does to me in this game, and if you're okay with it, why are you okay with it? What about it is okay? And don't just say you can play around it. There's a lot of the stuff that I discussed at the beginning of the video that you can play around. It didn't change the fact that it was a very, very powerful play that really you only have a certain sort of tech or shot to stop it. I'd love to know your opinions on the game. Here's the game. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon. Wes likes what he sees. He went ahead and wrote a guide. Play a couple more games of this. Correct my casual win rate a little bit because it's a little on the low side. Gotta say that Herald and that
Men of Kedwen, attack!
reveal deck. I mean, the reveal deck, whatever, but the Herald deck, woof, got smoked playing that deck. As soon as McBee maybe gives his input, I think. What's my input on this? I want to know how a Frightener feels, but I'm never drawing that card. I just haven't drawn it. I haven't drawn it, haven't seen it, nothing. The fear of Arnar and Drought is slowly being removed. Well, the solution is stacking row, right? Henselt, cool. I get to see how this functions against Henselt. 95% of your matches? Yeah, it's super good, but it's also a great spy if you're ahead. Like right now we know Caretaker, like Gels is so good, you guys. The only problem is if you play Gels and you get Kran and Frightener, you have to play one of them. But then you can Caretaker. No. What am I talking about? There's no way to get it back in your hand.
Doubt I'll ever pay off these school loans.
Weather everywhere. Thanks for cracking those eggs for me, though. Much appreciated. Arnar is not in every deck in ranked. Not even close. Not even close. I wish it was in every deck so I knew that I could only have to count 3 gold cards. It's not, though. It's not even like half the decks.
I'll ever pay off these school loans.
Not saying it's not really a comment on the strength of Ragnarok, but I'm just saying. He's playing this super liberally. I think he has 3 Adepts in his hand for 3 weathers that he runs. Weather Northern Realms. I do like the card Aratu's Adept, though. She's trying to pay off those school loans, you know? That's all she's trying to do. Yeah, nerf my allergies. My thoughts on the viability of an NR Reaver Hunter deck? I haven't played it, and it hasn't been played against me. I swear. But it's being played against me right now. So I guess we're going to find out. Especially considering I have a lock in my hand, too. Now that's the right time to play it. Arguably a pretty decent pass here. There was no operator, so one lock should be good enough, right? Oh, good Philippa right here. That's a good Philippa right there. Reaver's back into his deck with the NECA and draw them all out with Henselt in the last round. Is that so? So Nanika's not really bugged then? Nanika's not so bugged you can't play it? Still ahead. No one likes to give me those eggs. Anyway, he can't pull them out with Henselt if I keep the Fiend in my hand. Alright, play into this. The old 1 point pass. The old, what do you call this, gray boxer? The Turing machine pass. You're ahead by 1 point and up a card. You pass. They all have egg PTSD. Were eggs ever scary though?
Do you want to tickle me?
Were eggs ever really scary? You've played a lot of Reaver Hunter and you've never had the Nanica bug? Well, maybe I've just seen it on stream a couple times and I just don't want to deal with it. I want to play Northern Realms. I want to play Botchling. Like, there's a Botchling deck that I'd like to try. Oh, that Becker's with no... Okay, I don't think I need two of these, honestly. What is this? Is that a Necker? That Necker is just 3, too. I don't think anything's consumed anything. It's just 2. It's just a baby. It's just a baby.
Welcome, chosen.
Oh, here comes a Reaver? No, that changes things, doesn't it? As long as I can lock one, because he played one's in the graveyard, only one's in the graveyard, right? So he can't Henselt them all back. Like, well, no, that means there's 2 in the deck, which means, yes, he can play a Reaver Hunter and then Henselt them out, but I can lock that one. He won't get that 4th one to help him complete it.
Let's go.
This would be a great K-Ran food. I can also, assuming that stays locked, I could Caretaker the other one out. Oh, boy. It's a bit of a problem. Becker's might save me if I had something tiny on the board here. New card, new card. You know what I could do though? Couldn't I just frighten her the... No, it doesn't work like that, does it? Can you break the trio by splitting them up? Man, I actually don't know. I don't know what the safe play is here. Because he has them all, right? Now, if you put a lock... Okay.
Naivety is a fool's blessing.
Okay, I get it with Water Hag. Okay, so I'm going to have 8 strength on the board with K-Ran coming into my hand. I'm going to mull Becker's because I just don't see it. I'll correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't see... Maybe Blood Curdling Roar is actually what I should mull.
The gate must be secure. Any last words? Let's go.
Maybe that's enough? I don't know. 31. How big is this play? I need to actually see it to understand how insane it is. He had 33. It was 30 or 31. 16. 7 minus 6. That's a fucking hell of a play, man. That's nuts. That's broken. That's a problem. I'm not even mad. It's a casual game and it doesn't matter. But to be ahead by that many points and just do it in one? And to do it in one card? That can't possibly stay like that. It's a little too good, isn't it? Well, I'm not saying that I wasn't denying that it would happen. I just don't know. Now I know. 31 points ahead. Easily handled by Henselt when he had one target to hit. If he would have had 4 hunters, it would have been more insane. You have to win round 1 this deck and push their combo at round 2. Weather is not a problem, but Reavers are. Yeah? What Weather is doing 30 points in the last card combo? There's a huge difference. 4 Reavers is hell on earth. How do you thin? Tibor is too much. Sad thing is the rest of NR seems so weak. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. You played a Hunter deck with Operator. Opponent also Operator. Last week you put 100 plus points with 1 card in Henselt. So that's a problem, right? That's a problem. Who thinks that that's okay? I mean, I was prepared to lose that game. I just had to see it to understand and believe it. Flashy and inconsistent. This guy seemed to have no problem. And I even shaved like 5 points off of his combo, too. Henselt's the problem? You think that the reinforcement effect is the problem? How about a trio effect in which they buff each other all the time every time they're played, buffed forever, and then they have a damage component? I think that's a problem. Name one other trio that's that scary.
Do not test my patience. The gate
It's a big problem, though, right?
Secure.
And it's not about beating the deck. I just want to make that clear. It's not about beating this deck, like how do I beat Henselt Reaver? It's about, is it okay that he can do that? And you can look at a lot of changes that were made in Gwent over time that the answer to that question was no when we were talking about any card, like Old Spear Tip. Is it okay that he did that? Boy, was it ever not okay. Because they made... They encased Old Spear Tip in gold and threw him in the ocean, is what they did. Sound like us talking about weather? But it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. That is a single play. I'm not outraged. I'm just identifying that as something that they probably want to look at, and they probably are looking at. They don't need me to tell them if that's what they're seeing. And if they're seeing like the 80 plus, 100 plus point turns, like don't get too attached to that.